Hello, my name is Craig Mertens, General Manager of GraphicsFlow. Welcome to the webcast today. Our Friday afternoon GraphicsFlow member webcast. And we are going to we're going to talk about a very complicated topic today. And it's something that honestly just kind of stresses people out. And, fortunately, it's something I know quite a bit about because I've been dealing this with a long time, which is all these graphics formats, all these file formats that customers send to you and what to do with them and which ones are good and which ones are bad and how to ask for art and how to exchange art between different programs. It's actually a pretty frustrating thing. And where do you go to school to learn something like that? You don't. This is stuff you just learn on the job. You learn through the course of, just, the, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You learn what works, you keep doing more of that. You learn what doesn't, you stop doing that. That's kind of how dealing with customer supplied artwork works. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit about some very specific practices that you can take to kind of weave your way through that. But before we do that, we really have to talk about all these different formats. So we're going to kind of rip through the popular graphics formats. And I'm going to kind of break them down and evaluate them for you from my 2 cents. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to use GraphicsFlow, just the file preview generation of GraphicsFlow, to kind of talk about that a little bit. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the video portion of the webcast, and then you guys are just going to see my screen nice and big on your screen. So first thing I want to talk about, file format previews. Not every graphics format has a preview, meaning you can see the actual file without opening it. And so one of the things that you guys probably are not necessarily tuned into is when you are running Smart Designer, our add-on software for Corel, and you are saving certain files Let's see, I can try my other headset. Oh, you can hear me through there. Let me see if I switch back to go to meeting. Can you hear me now? Nope, it's not wanting to play the audio. Well, can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me now? Hold on. Now you can hear me? Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, it just dropped out on my new, it's making, I'm having some problems with my new audio setup. Let's do this. Let's start over again, and that way we can get the good recording. So let's do that. And I can go back offline and edit this. So I'm just gonna start over again. All right, can you guys still hear me? Can you hear me now? All right, I'll have to keep an eye on it. I don't know why that dropped out. That's really weird. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just start over, okay? Hello, this is Craig Mertens. I am the General Manager of GraphicsFlow. Welcome to the webcast today. Today we are gonna be talking about file formats. And so one of the things that's challenging for a lot of folks in our industry is just kind of deciphering this alphabet soup of file formats. And one thing that I've done right now on my system is I've uploaded a variety of file formats to my GraphicsFlow account. I created a folder, I called it folder image previews. And then what I've done is I've gone in and uploaded a variety of file formats. And you'll notice there's previews so I can see these files. These previews are being created when I go in and upload the files in GraphicsFlow. So what it does is it processes the file. So like in the area of like a Adobe Illustrator file, it's going in and generating a preview from the AI file. It's doing the same thing for embroidery files like DSTs. CDR files, it's actually extracting the preview from inside of the file. So that's why we're getting all these previews. So one of the things that it's really important is that you guys aren't necessarily aware of is that a lot of times the previews on your Windows computer where you're able to see files, those are being generated because of Smart Designer. Those are preview extensions that we install that add previews for Adobe Illustrator files, EPS files, and PDF files. Those are kind of the three big ones. And so if you don't have Smart Designer installed and activated, you can't view those types of files. And oftentimes, like we have clients that like they discontinue their Smart Designer membership, and then they start asking questions like, why can't I see my EPS, PDF, and AI files? And I go, because those previews are being supplied by Smart Designer. We install a preview extension. One of the things the other thing that, that comes up sometimes is sometimes you guys will see your CorelDRAW files, your .cdr files, and you'll see those files as CDR icons versus a preview. The reason for that is that your file is not being associated with the newest version of Corel. And so if I come over here and go to properties on this CDR file, you notice this file is being associated with CorelDRAW 2021, and that is what's creating the preview. So that's the preview is being created because of my association with the newest version of CorelDRAW. So when the new version of CorelDRAW 2022 drops here in the next few weeks, what will happen is if I install it, I'm probably going to be back to looking at CDR thumbnails again. And so I'll have to go in here and associate those CDR files with CorelDRAW 2022. So that's a really important thing to consider. Now, in terms of file formats, there's basically two flavors. There's vector-based artwork and there's bitmap-based artwork. And there's really no better way to talk about that than just showing you. Pixel-based artwork or bitmaps is what we're called, are composed of pixels. They're little tiny dots. There's no lines. It's not what you would call line artwork where it's like a drawing and there's objects. Vector-based artwork is composed of lines and objects. In Corel, if I come over here and I go to view and I go to wireframe view, you can very clearly see the vector objects in this design. And what makes that unique is I can change individual objects, I can select objects, delete, I can change colors. I have an incredible amount of latitude in terms of changing this file because it's composed of vector objects. And one of the things that's really nice about vector artwork is the file sizes are much smaller, but it's scalable. Meaning if you take this file and you blow it up to put it on a billboard 20 feet tall, it'll be the same quality as it is on a pen. And that's one of the beautiful functions of the vector format. And kind of the granddaddy file format for all vector-based files is actually EPS, which stands for Encapsulated PostScript. And that's kind of the granddaddy file format. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But vector file is composed of lines and objects. When you start typing in text in Corel or using the drawing tools of Corel, it is creating vector-based artwork. That's scalable, super easy to edit. Now, bitmaps, another story. Bitmap artwork is composed of pixels. Bitmap formats that are very popular are going to be your GIF format, not GIF. Or you can make the argument GIF. I'm team GIF. You can be team GIF if you want to, but I like to say GIF. GIF format, JPEG format, it's another popular one. PNG format and TIFF format. Those are your most popular bitmap formats. And so, how do you tell if a file is a bitmap versus a vector? Typically, one of the giveaways is just looking at it. You can see oftentimes pixelation with graphics. If they are bitmap, I'm going to take this file. I'm going to convert this to a bitmap, and I'm going to convert it to a 300 dpi bitmap with a transparent background and anti-aliasing. And we'll talk about what anti-aliasing is in a second. So I've just converted this file, and you're really not going to see much difference in this file. Even if you zoom in, you'll start seeing a little bit of pixelation. Here's the before, and here's the after. I'm just using Control Z. This will print nice at 300 dpi. This file is gonna print really well. I'm not concerned about it printing, especially at this larger size. But you still got a little bit of fuzzy edges. But you've really lost your ability to easily, you don't have any way to grab objects and delete them or move them. If I scale this file up, and this file right now is 300 dpi, and I double it, and I go to 200% and hit enter, the DPI just dropped to 150. We're just spreading those pixels out over a larger area. And what's going to happen is as the bigger this gets, what you're going to see is imperfections in the artwork. It's going to start to look pixelated. And as you know, the typical web graphic, I'm going to undo this down to a vector again. And I'm going to convert this to a web graphic, which is going to typically be pretty small. So I'll make this, maybe we'll just type in 2 over here, 2 inches by 1.91. And I'm going to go over here and type in, or go over here to bitmaps, convert to bitmap, and I'm going to make this 72 dpi. I'm going to turn off anti-aliasing, and I'm going to turn off transparent background. And this is your typical web graphic. And that don't look good. So turning off anti-aliasing really, really hurts this file. I'm going to undo it, and then we're going to turn anti-aliasing back on, and we're going to do it, and it looks a lot better. Anti-aliasing, what it does is you don't get that stark contrast with the pixels. It kind of blends the colors in along the edges, so you get a more natural look to it. So see how it's just kind of going in here and blending those in. So it's almost like it's fading it. If we go and do this, and we turn the anti-aliasing off, and we'll come in here and we'll turn it off, then you just get that straight stair step look, and it just doesn't look good, and you can't really even tell the graphics going on there. So web graphics are not suitable for printing. And if you get a 72 dpi bitmap, that in itself is not necessarily problematic. What's problematic is the quality of the bitmap. Does it look pixelated, and the physical size. You can have a 72 dpi bitmap of a logo, but it's physically large. It's here, I'll prove that to you. We'll go over to the interweb here, and I'm going to do a googly search for a high resolution. Let's see, we'll do a logo for, we'll do a sports logo. We'll do Rams logo. Okay, you're not authorized to use the Rams logo, but I'm going to go over here, and we're going to do a search for high resolution Rams logo. And let's see if we can find one. This is a wallpaper here. And I'm just gonna, 1600 by 1900 pixels. This is a high resolution image. And I'm just gonna copy that image to my clipboard here. And this is a great way to get malware. You click on that button, you are infected. So just word to the wise, this is generally not a good idea to do it, to ever download anything, but you can certainly copy and paste. And so here's the image, and it's physically large proportions. It has some what we call artifacting in it. So that's what that is. Those are artifacts. So when this was converted to a bitmap, it was probably converted to, I think this was a JPEG file originally. Let's take a look. Save image as. Yeah, it's a JPEG. And so the JPEG is what's creating that artifacting. Now, if we were to come over here and let's see, find this PNG image right here, and I'm going to copy this image, and we're going to paste that into Corel. And you're not going to see that artifacting on the PNG image. It's the reason you see artifacting on the PNG image, or the JPEG images, it's a compressed file format. And so the format itself is compressed, and that's what's creating that, that's what's creating that, I guess you would say, for lack of a better word, distortion. And that's what it is, it's distortion. And so JPEG format is a terrible format. The reason that people use JPEG format is quite simple. It's a generic in nature, and it can be compressed into small sizes. So for web graphics, it's great because you can still see something that looks pretty decent, but it can be compressed into something that's really small. And file size is important. Smaller file size loads quicker in a browser. It's not as important today as people had in the past, where, back in the AOL days, remember that dreaded modem sound you'd hear when you'd I can't do it, but everybody that's in my age group knows that sound. So having a smaller file was really important, so your web browser would load quicker. But now everybody's got high-speed internet, and so PNG files are not as compressed; they're slightly larger, but they just look better. And so for displaying things on the web, and that's bitmap based, PNG is a great format. It looks better. It's a little bit cleaner. It definitely, you don't see that aliasing and the artifacting. And frankly, this is a print-ready file. I could take this file. Not that I'd recommend doing this, but I could just take this file right here in Corel, go to Trace Bitmap, go to Outline Trace, and then I would probably use the clip art preset. And let's see what Corel does with it. And we'll go ahead and click on OK. And we just trace that, and that's not bad. The tracing in Corel continues to get better and better and better. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better, and it's definitely improved. In Corel 2021, I've noticed significantly better tracing. And this is a vector image, so I can ungroup that. And if we want to start playing around with colors, we can do all that fun stuff because we just vectorized it. So bitmaps for printing, the big drawbacks are, if you scale them up, they can be distorted and pixelated. Not easy to go and do what I just did here is change colors. Once I I got all this latitude in this file once I vectorized it. So, talking about like the basic bitmap formats, we talked about JPEG files. By default, usually your digital camera is going to save your file in a JPEG by default. Your iPhone, your Android phone, JPEG by default. The format itself is not the problem, it's the compression that can be the problem, that can cause artifacting. PNG files, compact, look great, but they support transparency. And that's the biggest difference between a JPEG file and a PNG file is transparency. And let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm gonna just create our little logo right here, the little Rams logo we got right here. And I'm gonna double click on my page background, and I'm gonna change this background to black, okay? And I'm going to save this file right now. I'm going to save it. And I'm going to save this file as a bitmap. I'm going to convert it to a bitmap. And I'm going to make it full resolution, which in Corel is 300 dpi. And I'll use anti-aliasing, and I'm going to say transparent background. PNG files have transparency, okay? If I change this to a GIF, or if I change this to a JPEG file, it will not have transparency, and you're going to get the white bounding box, which is a real bummer. If you are going to be in a situation where you are, let's say, trying to mock this up on a product, right? You're going to try to mock this up on a product, you're going to get a white bounding box if this is a product other than white. And so that's really one of the great advantages of the PNG format, is supporting transparency. TIFF format also supports transparency. Mac guys love the TIFF format, but I would say for printing digitally, PNG is a great format, and it's not over compressed, and frankly, it just works, and it has support for the transparent background, which I think was pretty important. So let's compare some file sizes just for grins. So I'm gonna take our RAM here, and I'm gonna get the background off here, and I'm gonna first save this file as a PNG format. So I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna use the export function in Corel, and we'll go over here and select export. And I'll create a desktop folder, and we're just gonna call this folder file formats. And we're going to call this RAMs logo. And again, we're not endorsing that you use the RAMs logo. We're just using it for training purposes. I'm going to choose PNG. Do not show filter dialog. Bad idea. You always want that unchecked, because you are going to get this next little dialog that's going to come up. And the next little dialog is going to say, hey, what do you want to do with this PNG file? You want it to be RGB colors? Yes, for sure. What color are you making transparent? I'm choosing to make the white background transparent. Why is it not knocking out that white? Because that's not transparent white. So that color is not RGB transparent white. The value for transparent white in RGB is 255, 255, 255. That is a Pantone white. So it's never going to knock through. Now, if I change that to RGB 255, 255, 255 white, that would have disappeared as well. So if you want to create a PNG file but still have white show up in it, make sure it's not RGB white. You can change the matte, the transparency color to other colors if you choose to. I'm choosing anti-aliasing. It's embedding a color profile. That's really not going to make a big difference. I'm leaving it at its original size, and I'm choosing to keep it at 300 dpi. Okay, so we're just going to save that file. 300 dpi. Then for grids, we're going to export this file with the same settings as a JPEG file. And file format right here, we're going to save that. We're going to call that RAMs. It's going to be a JPEG. So we're going to go over here and we're going to select JPEG right here under JPEG. Don't do this JPEG 2000, just do regular JPEG. Same thing's gonna happen. I'm gonna get this little export deal. Now, if I'm doing something for the web, I don't need to go full 300 dpi. I could go like 150, but I'm choosing high quality JPEG, but I'm gonna reduce this down to medium quality JPEG, or you can go to custom here and you can set the compression settings here. So, but I'm gonna go to medium quality JPEG, and then notice all this stuff over here just changed. And as far as like the resolution, it's going to be under this transformation button here. So we're going to keep it at 300, and basically very similar settings to what we did with the PNG file. So we're going to save that. Then just for grins, we're going to export this as a GIF file. And I don't know why anybody would ever use a GIF file, unless they're going to maybe animate it. And so let's go ahead and export that. And you're going to see a pretty big difference when you export this, because of the color format. It doesn't support as many colors. And so it only is going to support up to 256 colors. So if this was a really colorful image, you're going to see some problems in this. And so in other words, don't use GIF files. And then we're also going to save this as another popular bitmap format, which is a TIFF format. Mac guys love the TIFF format. Nothing wrong with the TIFF format. Great format. Very similar to PNG. And so we're going to export this as a TIFF. But TIFF files have lossless compression. So if I export this file as a TIFF it's going to compress, but it's a lossless compression versus the compression in a JPEG file, which loses quality. So in a TIFF file, it can compress it and it'll retain its original quality, which is pretty cool. So we're not changing size or DPI on any of these. Okay, we're just using pretty much just defaults. Okay, so we've created these files, and we just want to go poking our way back into the file formats folder, and we just want to see kind of what's going on here. So I'm going to just start clicking on these. So PNG file is going to open up in my case to the Photos application in Windows. I have it associated to open up to the Photos app. You can associate it to open to anything. You can associate it to open back up into Corel. JPEG file, probably going to open in my web browser. Nope, I've got it associated. Looks pretty good, but you see that artifacting in there again? Man, we're just yuck. Okay, just not cool. We're going to go over to the GIF file. You're probably going to see some pixelation in this one. Yep. Welcome to GIF land. You're going to see that pixelation. It can't create all that blending because it doesn't support this huge number of colors that's available. Okay. Then we're going to go over to the TIFF file, and TIFF file should look great. Should look, you get a little bit of pixelation going on with the RAM there and the horns, but let's take a closer look at the PNG, and that's going to be your best file. You got the anti-aliasing, smoothing that out, looks great. So, from a visual point of view, we use the same resolution settings on all of this, but from a point of view of using, the formatting, changing the format, the quality is actually changing. It's a different quality, and I'm going to go to list view here, and I'm going to go down here and change to list view in Explorer, and we're going to get the scoop on the sizes. TIFF file is huge. This is the uncompressed TIFF. Is 9.9. I didn't compress the TIFF. This is the original file. It's 9 megabytes. This is the GIF file. It's 14K because it's designed to load. It's got fewer colors and it's designed to load really quick in a web browser. JPEG file is 100K, and the PNG file is uncompressed at 206, and it's actually the best quality file. Go figure. So I think I've made a pretty good argument for when you're saving bitmaps, PNG is the way to go. It'll display in a web browser, displays great in Facebook. Any kind of sample or thumbnail image that you're creating for an e-commerce store, PNG is the way to go. It's just a great format, simple, kind of hard to mess up, prints great. If you have a sublimation printer and you have to bring it into like a RIP software, or a DTG printer, need to bring it into a RIP, bringing in a PNG file is a great way to do it because you don't have to worry about any kind of distortions to the graphic that are going to be created when you do a vector file, because vector files can get kind of weird when you export them. So those are the primary bitmap formats I wanted to talk about. So let's get into vectorland now. So vectorland, the granddaddy of them all, and we'll just create a folder and we're going to call this bitmaps. Bitmaps. Okay, the granddaddy of them all, file format wise, is EPS. So it's kind of like the original vector format. And EPS files, and I'll just create a folder here and call it vector. EPS files do not have, they're generic in nature. That's like Jello, but they can be version sensitive. And what that means is if you have a specific version of CorelDRAW or Illustrator, you may not be able to open that file or view that file properly if you don't have the correct version for that version of Illustrator or for that version of the EPS file. And I cringe when I hear about clients sending EPS files in for, like supplying artwork. And here's why. Because I don't know what that file is really supposed to look like. It might look different in Corel on my end than it does in Illustrator. They can create an EPS file in a program that's a consumer level program. You can create an EPS file in some consumer level photography programs. EPS files can also have bitmaps and vector. It can be both. When they have bitmaps, typically they downsample the bitmap so it doesn't look great. It's low resolution. And one of the other issues with EPS files, you can accidentally import the header to the bitmap, which is the preview of the file, versus the actual high quality of the file. And that was actually a real problem for us back in the day when we were early days of clip art, because in Corel, if you didn't check the little box saying import the original, then it would import the thumbnail, and people would call, these files look terrible. It says, yeah, because you imported the thumbnail. So vector files, let's talk about EPS files. Corel Draw does make an EPS file, but let me show you what it does with an EPS file, just so you know. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say File, Export. EPS stands for Encapsulated PostScript. It's a Adobe format. It was originated by Adobe. They don't own it. It's I don't think you could make the claim that it's open source, but nobody really owns EPS files. So EPS, Encapsulated PostScript. Again, the filter dialog is going to come up, and we're going to call this Rams EPS, and we're going to see a whole bunch of jazz going over here in Corel. And these are all defaults. So RGB colors, I'm going to export the text as curves. So it converts all the text to curves, so I don't get any kind of weirdness when I open up this in Illustrator with text. There's no text in here, but if I had text in here, I'd do that. I'm going to leave all this stuff the same. PostScript level 2, TIFF preview. This is a preview that's embedded in the file. This has nothing to do with the quality of the file because this is a vector file. It doesn't have resolution. There's no dots per inch. This is simply the preview that's getting embedded into this file right here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to Advanced. And under Advanced, I'm not going to compress any bitmaps in the file. I can put my name in here, and it's not a bad thing to do. We won a huge lawsuit because we had our names of our company embedded in all the EPS files that this guy was selling on his own disk of all of our art that he copied. So when they opened up the files, you could see our name imprinted on it. That was pretty incriminating from the judge. Said, why don't you guys go out in the hallway here and maybe reach a settlement because this doesn't look good for you guys. So that was great. Sidebar, our very aggressive attorney made the gentleman that was in violation of our copyrights wrote into the contract that he had to destroy 1,000 CDs, and he made this gentleman sit out in the parking lot of his law office with a sledgehammer in the middle of summer and destroy 1,000 CDs, and that is not something I am at all proud of, by the way. So that's embedded in the file, and you don't believe me, I'll show you in a second. We're not going to change anything in here. We're just going to click OK. Okay, we're just going to make that EPS file. Here is going to be one of the problems. EPS file made in Corel, you do not get a preview. Or do you? You do if you have Smart Designer installed. If you don't have Smart Designer installed, you're not going to get a preview. So again, our preview extension is coming to the rescue and generating a preview for that. So remember when it said nice DPI TIFF? That's what that is. That's not the actual file. It's just a preview that's embedded into the document. And here's the crazy thing about EPS files. You guys ready? Wait for it. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to Open With, and I'm going to choose another app. And the app I'm going to choose is Notepad. You ready? Click on OK. Here's your EPS file. That's just a bunch of numbers. So you remember when I talked about us winning that lawsuit? We printed out the file, EPS file data, and our registration for our company was in there. Our serial numbers for Adobe Illustrator were in there. The date it was created was in there for every single file. And there is no way to flush that out. So once this is in here originally, every time you save that, that's residual data. And there's no way to flush it. You can copy and paste it over the clipboard. It's still going to be in there. So you can't, like, quote, wash an EPS file. So, people that, steal other people's content, that's actually a really big issue. So, and I can go in here and edit this. Won't make any difference in the file. I could type in Craig Mertens is awesome, and I can save that in the file. If I hit save, it's not going to do anything to mess with the EPS file. It just says Craig Mertens is awesome now. So my wife is laughing in the other room. So EPS files are giant text files. That's all they are. And what did I do when I changed that file? Did I mess the file up? I might have. Maybe I did. I don't know. Now I can't render the thumbnail. Guess I destroyed this file. We were doing good. Maybe I don't think I can undo it. So we're going to have to, oops. We're gonna have to go and save it again. I guess so. That's not a good idea, messing with that. Okay, vectors, and then let's save the bitmap here. Guess I'm not as awesome as I thought I was. Okay, file, export, and this time let's turn the preview off. So we're gonna go over here, we're gonna go to RAMs, and we're gonna call it RAMs again. I'm gonna say no preview. Okay, so this time when I create the file, let's see here, preview, none, okay? And once I click on that, then we'll do another version of it where we will create the preview. RAMs preview, export, TIFF, okay? Now here's where we start to have problems with EPS files. If I go in to this file right here and I start taking in things like, I go over here and add a fountain fill, okay? So if I go over here and I start adding like blends and gradients and things of that nature, so I just added a fountain fill to that, okay? And I export this as an EPS file, and let's say I am using, a good example we'll call this fountain fill. A good example would be Roland VersaCam. I'm exporting this to my Roland VersaCam, okay? This is where version sensitivity becomes a problem. It's how this format is able to create these blends and gradients. It's a primitive format. So if I go over here to advanced, I don't know if it's giving me fountain steps. They did change the EPS export in Corel 2021. I didn't notice that. Preserve document overprints, convert spot colors, postscript level. I think we're good. All right, so let's go ahead and click on OK. We'll create that one with the preview. So here's something interesting, is what you can't do unless something's changed. Importing a file, an EPS file that you created in Corel. In older Corels, if I tried to import this, it would error me out. And wow, that's cool. So that got fixed in 2020. Let's go to view and let's see wireframe. Okay, so what you can run into with some of the EPS exporting is what's called fountain steps, which is these jagged lines. And I can see exactly what Corel has done here. And I'll show you, we'll open up another version of Corel. What they've done is they've changed the EPS export, so it's a modern version of EPS that's more along the lines of what Adobe Illustrator creates. And the reason I know that is this. If I go and open an older Corel version like 2018, I don't know if 2018 is even activated on my system. Let's find out. Don't know. The EPS export is going to be very different in 2018. Like the options are going to be different. And so they're not letting you in Corel 2021 create an old school, like backwards compatible EPS file. They're only going to allow you to create a modern version of EPS. And the reason I know that is it's the gradients are getting created properly. Oftentimes, if you create gradients in the older versions of Corel, when you create an EPS file, you can get some pretty weird stuff going on here. And that's another reason to always have the latest version of Corel, is dealing with file format problems. You always are going to have issues importing and exporting files with these older Corel versions. And we're just going to create just a simple little file here. I haven't seen 2018 in a long time. Haha, they're making me pay more for an upgrade. If I close 20, they're trying to upgrade me to 2019. Do you see that? Okay, all right. We'll call this test, and I'll make this a little bigger. And we'll do this fun little font here. And I'm just gonna make it blue. And I'm gonna add a fountain fill here. And click on that, and then we'll export it to EPS. So let's go down here and do EPS format, test, hit export, and it's pretty much the same. It looks like it's pretty much the same. But let's see what happens if it generates a preview for us. That's the main thing I want to see. Okay, so let's get out of here and see what's going on in our vector format. Yeah, it did. It did create a preview, so that's pretty good. So I think the magic number for creating good quality EPS files in Corel is 2018. I think that's kind of the cutoff point. So EPS it's a good format, but here's the problem. You don't know what it's supposed to look like because it can look different in different programs. I could bring this file into another program, it could look totally different. And now bear in mind, I can import these files into Adobe Illustrator. So if I wanted to, open one of these files in Adobe Illustrator, it's a good, EPS is a good format for interchanging between formats. It's definitely a good format for doing that. And we'll do this one with the fountain fill. So this is still vector. You have the same fill, came in back and forth, but files can look different. And so as a result of that, I don't recommend using EPS files for transferring files between programs. Now, what about an Adobe Illustrator file? That's a great question. Okay, so we've gone in and we've created this file here in Adobe, and maybe we want to go back and forth and we want to save this to Corel. Watch what happens. If I go over here and I do we'll just do save a copy in Illustrator, and we're going to save that into our file formats, fountain fill AI. And what will happen when I go in to save this, I'm going to create a new folder, AI files. Okay, what's going to happen when I go to save this, I'm going to get this little window that's going to pop up, and it's going to say, hey, what version of Corel or Illustrator do you want me to save this file in? And it's going to default to the newest version. So, okay, so it's going to default to 2020. I haven't updated to the new 2022 Illustrator yet because there's a big issue with that. They got rid of Pantone color swatches in 2022. It's very controversial. So for us, it's a real bummer for creating artwork to sell you guys because they don't have the Pantone color support in there anymore. Apparently, they didn't want to charge Pantone, didn't want to pay the price that Pantone wanted for the licensing, which is probably in the millions. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And we created this Illustrator file in the most recent version of the Illustrator format. And I'm just going to try doing the old drag and notice the preview. That's courtesy of Smart Designer. And I'm going to actually just drag and drop that into Corel 2021. We're going to see what happens. Look at, boom, colors changed. Isn't that fun? So that's why Illustrator is a terrible format to try to interchange files between Corel and Adobe because it's version sensitive. Now I might get a completely different result if I go and change this to go back into Adobe and take this file and now do this, like say, okay, let's save as Illustrator version. Okay, we'll call this Legacy. So we're going to pick an older version of Adobe Illustrator. We're going to come down here. I'm just going to do an Illustrator 8 file. Okay, old Illustrator. This is a really good generic version of Illustrator for older versions of Corel. Okay, so we're going to do that, and we're going to see what happens here. Let's go on. We'll just do import this time. Adobe Illustrator Legacy. Now I lost my preview. Okay. It's even worse. Now we lost the yellow because that gradient won't translate. So the gradient for that file is not going to translate from in this older version of Illustrator because it doesn't support that modern gradient. So again, our colors are whacked out, and you might not know that something's wrong. Now, what would be interesting is going into Illustrator and saving this as We got a couple different things. We can save this as, we'll just call this Legacy 2 Illustrator EPS file. So we can come down here and say Adobe Illustrator EPS file right here. Okay. And I'm going to change it to like just a CS version, older version. So do you see where this is such a drag? You have to know all this stuff about what version is right and what goes into what. And, you know, it's just, you know, this is where you get into the land of kind of alphabet soup. Again, color shifted. So what's the solution then? The solution is PDF, 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 PDF all day long, PDF, always PDF, never not PDF, PDF for everything. Anytime you're getting files from one supplier to another supplier, from you to a supplier, back from a supplier, because in PDF, the proofing file and the actual production file are one and the same, so you can actually see what it's supposed to look like. So I'm going to go into Corel. I'm not going to export as PDF. I'm going to go to publish as PDF. So I'm going to publish this file as a PDF file. And we're going to create a folder. We'll call it PDF. And what we're going to do in this PDF folder is we're going to call this RAMs. Actually, let's do this. Let's do something more complicated. So you'll get to see whatever the last template I did. So load last template. Oh, I did a logo for Marcos Quintero. Nope, that was the last logo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say publish to PDF. I'm going to choose a setting, PDF for editing. This is the purest form of a PDF file. And we're going to call this golf. And this is editing preset. Okay. So when I go to settings over here, what you're going to see is all these different settings. Under color, I don't want to do anything. I want to keep it as its native color. This is Pantone colors. This will go into Adobe as Pantone colors. I don't want to change any of this. Don't want to change spot colors to RGB. If there's color separations, we're going to lose those. Under document, my name's stamped in there. That's good. Under objects, I'm not compressing any of the bitmaps in this file. This only impacts bitmaps. Now, if I go to JPEG, then I could put a JPEG compression in here and it'll reduce the file size, but quality is going to reduce as well. So we're not going to compress anything. Under prepress, it's going to preserve halftones if I'm be screen printing this. Security, I'm not putting any passwords in here. I'm just using the default settings, not changing anything. So we're just going to go over here and just say save, and we're going to create the PDF file. Go over to Illustrator, file, open, go to PDF, open. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Come back here, file, save as, adding PDF AI preset. This is the one we're doing from Illustrator. And we're just going to use the defaults from Adobe again. I'm just going to go back and use the Illustrator default. Okay. We're going to create a PDF there. File, import. I'm just going to import it right into this document. Node for node, object for object, an identical image. Grouping, the only thing that got kind of distorted was the grouping got changed because the grouping, we lost all of our grouping. So that's the only thing that changed, but this is the same colors, same everything. The same Pantones were preserved, Pantone 207. So when I say PDF, 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 I'm not kidding. PDF goes between Illustrator perfectly, CorelDRAW perfectly, Photoshop perfectly, Corel Photo Paint perfectly, the sign programs most of the time. PDF is the magic format. And the absolutely best, if you had to pick one format and said everything should be that format, should be PDF. And Corel makes a great PDF, Adobe makes a great PDF, and they're identical. And so one of the things that's kind of cool about this is I can actually see what the file is supposed to look like, because this is the magic of PDF. If I double click on this, I can open it in whatever my default PDF viewer is, and I know exactly what it's going to look like, because it's going to look the same way in Microsoft Edge like it is right here, as it's going to look like in Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW. So I kind of, just to kind of reiterate here, when you're sending files to suppliers, PDF. When you're getting files from suppliers, PDF. When you're getting files from customers, PDF. When you're sending files to customers, PDF. PDF for everything. Even for bitmaps, PDF is great. So PDF format is like the magic format. It stands for portable document format. One of the greatest things that Adobe ever did. The PDF format is also the kissing cousin to the Adobe Illustrator format. So it really is the AI format with just different formatting options. It's really what it is. This file is probably pretty small. Yeah, 156. The one that Corel created, this gained weight. The Corel one was 48K, but it gained some weight when it came through Illustrator because it's probably got a bigger preview built into it. But it's a wonderful format. And the other thing too is, with Smart Designer installed, you get the previews. So great format. Now, another good format that is pretty, I would say, reliable is SVG. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. And SVG format is a vector format, but it's a web-enabled vector format. It is the web-enabled vector format. And so as a result of that, like for those of you that are InkSoft users, if you create an SVG file and you import it into here, we'll do that real quick. Here, let's do that. So I'm going to take this file, the original, and I'm going to save this as an SVG. Okay. So I'm going to save it as an SVG. So I'm going to use the export function from Corel, and I can save it as an SVG file in Adobe as well. And we'll just go down here and we'll just say, we'll create a SVG folder. Okay. And we'll call that Gulf. Where'd my mouse go? There we go. And 3 screens gets confusing sometimes. Gulf. Okay. And we'll change that to SVG. And SVG is an open standard file format. I'm just going to use the Corel presets. SVG 1.1 is going to use the Corel presets. That's not going to do anything special. You're not going to get a preview with an SVG file. And the reason for that, you can create a preview with Smart Designer with an SVG file. You can enable that, but we disable that by default because there's certain SVG files that get created that can cause Windows Explorer to crash. And so that's why we don't generate previews for SVG files anymore. We used to do that, but it can actually cause Windows Explorer to crash. And specifically files created in drawings. So drawings SVG files will cause Windows Explorer to crash when we try to generate previews. So let's go to the InkSoft demo website. And I'm going to go to my little shortcuts here. Art portals. This is the InkSoft demo website. You guys can play around with that if you want. Here, we'll put that in the chat. Boom. Okay, and I'm going to go over here to start designing. And I'm going to pick this t-shirt. And I'm going to hit design now. And I'm going to click on upload image. And I'm going to go to that SVG file. I thought we saved it in there, didn't we? There's no file in there. Where did I put it? Did I not save it? Oh, because it's in the PDF folder. Okay, ready? File formats, PDF, SVG. Cut, file formats, paste. Did you guys know you could do that right inside of Windows? And then we're going to open it. Now, InkSoft is going to make me do a little bit of work here. So it's brought it in. Check it out. It can map the colors. So I can go over here and I can select that color and make this gold now. I can go over here and I can select that color and make, oops, gotta be careful with that. The undo button. I always forget where the undo button is. Horizontal flip, undo, right here. So you can change the colors on this in your InkSoft platform because it's vector. And that's one of the true benefits of SVG. And InkSoft Designer works off the SVG format. It's an SVG design engine. Now let's come back here and we'll do a PNG file. We'll go to design now. So all these files that you guys create in Smart Designer and you're an InkSoft user, you can just upload them into your InkSoft. It's pretty amazing. Okay, so let's go over here and we'll go to bitmap formats and we're going to pick the PNG file here. And now it's going to make you do a little more work. So PNG, it's going to say, hey, do you want to remove the white background? Nope, we don't. I want to keep the original. And then it's going to say colors. How many colors do you want it to be? Do you want it to be 3 color, 4 color, or do you want it to be the full color original file? I'm just going to, for grins, just pick 3. And here's the colors it's picking, coincidentally. Hit finish. Look at PNG file. You can change the colors. That's InkSoft. Pretty amazing. So, you know, these guys did this part of the technology, just did a remarkable job. And one of the things that, if you're an InkSoft person, one of the things that you should be tuned into is the big art refresh. So they did the big art refresh, sent out an email on this. And it has a whole bunch of new graphics that it was kind of fun for me because I got to be involved in that project and picking the new graphics for the InkSoft Designer. And so you'll know if you have the upgraded graphics in your InkSoft Designer if, just go to baseball and you'll see all the new stuff up here. That's what's at the top. And you can scroll down here and you'll see exactly where it kicks down to the old graphics right here. This is the first one. This is all the old stuff. And so, boom, there's all these new graphics and they're, you know, simple, clean, athletic sports graphics. If you're on an unlimited plan, you actually even get more graphics that are kind of like special. That's some of the graphics from GraphicsFlow made it in there. Not all. People keep asking me, "You're gonna put all?" Nope. Only the ones that make sense. Because what happens with these, we have to kind of scale these designs down and kind of dumb them down for the InkSoft Designer. So we have to dumb them down. They have to be simpler. It doesn't support the same level of like gradients and blends and all the complex types of multi-layer text effects that we can do in Smart Designer. But with that being said, in your GraphicsFlow account, starting in Q3, probably early this summer, you will be able to edit the Smart Designer templates or the CorelDRAW templates in GraphicsFlow in the app. You'll be able to do it on your phone. So anybody that's on an elite plan is going to have the ability to have in-app editing, which is really exciting. And you guys can go to our YouTube channel if you feel compelled to do that. All you got to do is go to your GraphicsFlow account or just go to the GraphicsFlow website and scroll down here to YouTube and you can watch a little video on in-app editing. It's pretty slick. Here, we'll preview it real quick. Oh, they just published the little movie on the new features we added to GraphicsFlow. Okay, let's go in. Come on, ad. We don't want to hear you, ad. All right, we'll have to deal with this ad for a couple seconds, then we'll skip ahead. So what you're going to be able to do is in your GraphicsFlow account, not the customer, but you guys, you'll be able to just click on customize. And hold on, I think it's right here in this slide. See, it says customize. You'll be able to click on customize. And then all the parts of the design will appear, kind of like the InkSoft designer, and you can change the text, change the colors, swap out the clip art. You'll be able to do that on your phone. You'll be able to do that on your tablet computer. You'll be able to do it on your PC. You'll be able to do it on your Mac. And what's going on here, this is our user interface, but you have the whole design engine of CorelDRAW running in the background that's doing all this. You're never going to see Corel, but that's what's allowing us to do this. Then when you're done, you just have an output format. It'll be a CDR file or a PDF. It's pretty amazing. So that's what's coming. All right, so back to file formats. Okay, so we talked about EPS. We talked about not being great. We talked about all the version sensitivity issues with trying to get AI files figured out. I think you guys are probably convinced that PDF is the way to go. And then SVG for like uploading to your InkSoft stores, it's great. SVG format is the common format for all the craft and hobby software. So when you're dealing with, Cricut Design Space and all that jazz, let me kill off the narration here. When you're dealing with Cricut Design Space and Silhouette Designer, they're going to be using the SVG format. So how does GraphicsFlow fit into all this? That's interesting, because I've been doing something kind of fun here, building up to this, and see if it works. So I'm going to go to my Flow account, and I'm going to create a folder under my art, and we're going to call it Torture Test. Okay. And then what I'm going to do in my Torture Test folder, I'm going to upload a folder. This is new. You guys have never seen this before. This allows you to upload folders. And so I'm going to go to that desktop file where I had all the file formats here, and I'm just going to upload the whole darn thing. Now, some of these older legacy files that I saved are probably not going to upload. But yeah, here's your directories and subdirectories. Here's your two AI files. The ones that didn't upload were the two super old ones that we put in there. Bitmaps, they're all here. PDF files, they're all here. Okay, there's your SVG. And then here's that other vector, even the old EPS file. So GraphicsFlow is amazing. If you guys knew what was going on behind the scenes here to make that happen, it's mind-boggling what we're doing on the processing side to do that. But I just uploaded a whole folder. So what does that mean? It means, like, let's say you have a bunch of Action Illustrated art and you just want to upload all the EPS files to your GraphicsFlow account. You can just click on one folder and just let it rip, upload the whole thing. Because I can go in here now if I want to, and I want to like apply a keyword to these. I can just go over here and just apply a keyword, just say edit tags, and then just type in RAM, and then add the term RAM to that. And then, a month from now, I'm, looking here at the files and I need, ooh, where's my RAM file? There you go. That's GraphicsFlow. Isn't that amazing? So we handle all these formats. So what is the advantage of having, access to all these formats that we can preview? Is you can actually see what's going on. You don't have to open these up in your program. We're able to preview formats that, that even the smart designer can't preview. Can't preview an SVG file. So Corel can't, Adobe Illustrator can't. We can preview everything. And the coolest part is if you click on this file, you can go in and you can, put whatever your production method is, your dimensions, keywords. If you add that to an art approval, so let's do a quick little art approval here, and we'll go over here and we'll create a torture test. I'm not going to call it that. And by the way, you can rename that folder if you need to say torture test, and we'll just call this RAM's art approval. Again, you're not authorized to use this logo. This is strictly for educational purposes. I'm going to go over here to my art. Remember I had that folder, torture test. So I'm just going to go to my torture test folder, and I'm going to go into file formats, and we're going to go over here to this AI file, and then we're just going to add it. So when this AI file is added to my art approval, notice it has the background knocked out, which means I can do this. I can go in here and click on it, I can change the background color. So if I want to make that gray, I can make that gray. Or if I wanted to make it black or whatever color. If I want to add a watermark to this, I can add a watermark to it. I'm not worried about somebody stealing the Rams logo because I'm not, but just turn on the watermarks right here, and then we'll just globally turn on a watermark. If I want to, send this to a client, I can just send that to a client. Approve to begin production, right? Okay, and here's the coolest part. This is new. So if you come in here and you click on reject, add an optional note, a reason why to provide more. I don't like the blend. You make this solid colors. So I just rejected it. So now I'm like, oh, crud. So what I'm going to do now is I got to make this solid color now. All right. So let's see, let's go add, oh, you know what? I already had a version of that with the solid color, because I think the PNG one, yep. There we go, just updated it. Get rid of this guy. We don't need him, delete him, delete him. Goodbye. See you, buddy. And then what we're going to want to do is just approve. So this is new, watch. When I hit approve, now I can put a comment in here. It says, please make sure that the RAM face is knocked through to the garment color. Why not? So I'm approving this with that statement. That's all in the comments. I'm clicking on the little disclaimer saying, hey, you know what? You can't use my art without my permission. Hey, colors are going to look a little different. Hit approve. And so now that's now officially approved, and the comment is all going to be updated in this file as well. So here's the comment that's logged in the file. There it is. This is approved. This is sitting in your approval queue. There's no doubt that it's been approved because an email went out to me that said, hey, you approved this. And then this is just, like I like to say, chilling out in my approved designs with all the documents. So this is why file formats are important. I think it's fundamental to the way you manage your business in the modern era, knowing how to deal with the file formats. And if you get one thing out of this class today, the one thing you should get is PDF, PDF, PDF. Ask for PDFs from your clients. Send PDFs to your suppliers. PDF out of Corel to Illustrator. PDF out of Illustrator to Corel. As long as you do that, life is good. Don't be exchanging Illustrator files between Corel and Adobe Illustrator. Don't be exchanging EPS files between Adobe Illustrator and Corel. Exchange PDF files, always works great. So, all right, so let's go and take a look at these questions. And okay, yeah, if you get the PDF file from the client and it's saved as a vector file, Canon, you can absolutely edit this. Because that file, I don't know, see if I can undo it back. That file is vector, man. So that's why, like, when you send PDF files to your clients, unless you even if you password, there's no password protection on a PDF. There's tools online that you can upload a PDF file and it'll crack the password. So, if you're really concerned about the client stealing the artwork, use your GraphicsFlow platform. That's what you should be doing, because then they don't have access to the original PDF file. They just get a preview, and you can watermark it. So that's where it makes sense. But yeah, you can edit the PDF files if it's vectored. What if they don't set it to editing? It doesn't really matter. Chuck, the main reason I set the PDF to editing was so that I had retained all of the original quality of the art. It didn't change the colors, didn't compress anything. It just changed, it kept the purest form of the art. If you go into the PDF settings and you choose, say, like a different PDF setting, I'll show you what I mean by that. If you go to publish to PDF This is where opening up the Smart Designer manual for you guys would be good, because it has all of the data behind this in the manual. There's a whole section on PDF files. But if I go over here to, like, say, PDF for document distribution, which is the default in Corel, and I go to settings, what's really changed? One of the things that's changed is compression. They switched to JPEG compression, so they're compressing the file. That's one of the things that's changed, and that's really the only change that's made. And also in PDF, I can go over here if I want to export this text to curve so it doesn't get a font substitution. I can just click on that in a PDF, and I don't have to touch the original CorelDRAW file. I can do that right in PDF. If I want to go put a piece of a security password in here so the person can't, edit the file, I can just say, we'll just call this password. Oh, hold on. We're just going to go PW because I'm lazy. And so permission password. Okay. Permission. They have no editing, no printing. Okay. So at this point, I'm just going to save this. I'm too lazy to give it a good title, but let's go re-import it. Sorry, you don't have the password, man. So savvy people know how to crack these passwords. So, if you're a nerd like me, you know how to do that. But, that's, use your graphics flow as your, to do the sign off and the approval. Keep all the track of all of the documentation, all the communication. They don't have access to the original file. You can watermark it. They have to click through a disclaimer. It's absolutely brilliant. Okay, let's see here. So here's the problem, Liveristo. A lot of times, like RIP programs like, Wasatch and FlexiSign, they don't necessarily have the same import functionality as, like, say, Adobe or Corel. So a lot of times their import functionality is kind of behind the times. And so the EPS format, which is what they're recommending that you use to import into your Wasatch RIP, is fine if it's created in a modern version of Corel or a modern version of Illustrator. It's fine. It's a modern version of EPS that gradients and blends are really the big issue. So as long as you're creating a modern version of an EPS file, you really shouldn't have a problem. The problem that people have is that if they have older versions of Illustrator or Corel that don't create these modern PDFs, then you get what's called fountain steps in your PDF, and your gradients will look very stair-stepped. They won't be smooth and clean. And so you don't have that issue with PDF files. But I've noticed in the newer version of the Versa RIP, for Roland, what I've noticed is it does not like PDF files from Corel 2021.5. I'm not running 21.5, I'm running just the 21 version. 21.5 is exclusive to people that are on the subscription. And I've seen with my Roland clients that it won't bring the cut line in if they use a PDF file anymore. It will if they do an EPS file. So that's kind of a concerning thing. We actually reported that to Corel as a bug. So like it looks kind of like they broke that part. So if a customer just sends you a PDF file, could it be editable? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on, if it's a bitmap or not. So I'll prove that point. You ready? So let's take this PDF right here, or this file in Corel, okay? And let's dupe it. And I'm just gonna, little Corel trick, if you just move it down here and right click, you can copy it. And the bottom one, we're gonna convert it to a bitmap. At 300 DPI, transparent background, same deal, good settings. And we're going to publish this as a PDF for editing. So it's in its rawest form. It's no modifications made to the original design. We'll just call it Untitled 5. And so we just made that little file, and then we're going to re-import it. File import. Little trick, if you hold your space bar down in Corel, when you click to import, it'll center it in your page where it was originally placed. Okay, so let's go to view wireframe. Yep, you can edit the one that was vector, but the bitmap was still bitmap. So if a lot of like the consumer programs Chuck, they don't have the ability to create a vector file. So even though they're designing their program, anytime they create a PDF, it automatically creates a bitmap file by default. So it just depends on what program the customer created it in. If you have old EPS files, can you use current version of Corel to update? Well, what you can do, you can use Smart Designer to batch convert them. So if you have a bunch of old EPS files, what you can do is another neat little thing on Smart Designer. Go to, I haven't done this in a while, scripts, run script. Click on, in macros, click on file converter, hit run. Go to the folder where your EPS files are. I don't know what it's doing here. You have to go to the folder where the EPS files are. Run script, run. And then you can select the EPS files and then tell them where you want it, to what format you wanted to convert them to, and it'll batch convert them. And there's a whole section in the manual that tells you how to do that. It's really slick. We use that tool constantly in our office to convert files. We had to convert all the files for graphics. So when we did graphics, so we had to convert them all to all the old EPS files to CDR files. So we took the old EPS files and converted them to new CDR files. So the batch converter is really, really handy. Okay, when sending an article, is a way to have it come from our name versus GraphicsFlow? Yeah, there is. But you would, if you want to do it that way, what you need to do is grab the invite link right here, and then just copy that link into your own email if you want to do that. But bear in mind, if you do that, they can't comment because you're bypassing the commenting system, but they can see the artwork, and then they could just say, yep, this is what I want. So you just send them the link to the art. We're going to change that. What we're going to do is we're adding a feature where when you copy the link, it's a specific link to the customer, and they can comment. So you can embed that into your own website or into your own email. So that's something we're changing. Is the focus on fonts webinar going to be available soon? Yeah, and when it should be up. I think it's already on the YouTube page. If you just got to go to the YouTube channel, let me show you how to get there. So just go to YouTube. I believe they uploaded it already. Go to playlists in Decorator Academy. And it's just a playlist. And here is all of the Decorator Academy classes. And I think they're in chronological order. So you can go in and pull all of the new ones. And this is really long. You might want to bookmark that. And while you're in there, subscribe to our page so that we can get our subscriptions up. Right. All right, so that's all the questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recorded portion of the webcast. We're going to stop.